Okay, hi. This is it. We are here, loving hands at home. We're going to do a little chitty chat with Casey today because Casey came into Abby's life. Is it 8 years ago?
It will be, let's see, it'll be 7 years this October, actually.
7 years this October. So we want to talk about what it's like to come into the world of autism when you have no understanding, no background, and no idea what you're walking into. All right. So we're going to start off with some just general questions that I think are so interesting from where I sit, having lived with autism for the past 27 years. Okay. All right. So here's the first question for Casey. Casey, what experience or understanding did you have of autism before you met Abby and you came here? What did you think of people with autism?
To be honest, I think it was something that I really didn't think about too much.
Oh, okay.
I had met a few people in high school that were in, like the special ed classes and things, but no one really knew
what that was,
what their diagnoses were.
Okay, that's a really
they were
good
kind
point.
of like, all clumped together in this one group. And, thinking back on it now, I'm like, oh, okay, I think that person might have had autism. Maybe this person had Down syndrome or some other thing. So it was something.
Down syndrome is a visible. It's like someone in a wheelchair, someone with Downs. Your radar goes on and says, okay, this person has some differences. I understand that.
Right.
But with autism, it is invisible in a lot of cases. And if you're in a typical school, a typical high school, and you might have a diagnosis, it was formerly called Asperger's, but we don't use that term anymore. It can be very, very confusing, I think.
And it was not like, I don't know how they would have done this anyway without it being strange, but it's not like everyone was like, oh, this is Bill, he has autism. This is Bob, he has Down. You know what I mean? As like a teenager, really,
you don't know.
You just kind of are clumping them all together in your brain. And I had never really spoken with them in depth and to really get to know them. So I think it was something that I didn't know a lot about. And I probably just thought oh, those are just people who have a harder time in life, I think is kind of what I deduced it to in my brain.
Yeah. So that brings me to a story. When I was in high school, I'm a little bit older than Casey. Just a little. I know it doesn't show, but
no.
I'm a lot older than Casey. But back in the day, this would have been in the late 70s, early 80s. There was a girl in my high school, and I was friends with the sister. And so the sister was my friend, but the girl was in regular education. She was smart enough to do her work, but she had a ton of unusual behaviors, and no one knew what was up with her. No one said a word to us. This is how it was back in the day. So this girl, I can remember her running out in the rain one time, just running out in the rain. She had no raincoat on, and all of us kids gathered around the window and saying, what is she doing?
Oh my gosh.
And no one said anything to us. And so to this day, I hadn't known, I shouldn't say to this day, but once Abby was born, I realized that girl had autism, but they just didn't say anything to us. So I believe in telling people that Abby has autism if it's showing in behaviors, stimming, just to diffuse the mystery. Because we in high school were afraid of this girl. And that really breaks my heart today, because there was probably so much personality that we could have had and helped this girl. But people stay away because they were scared. And I think that sometimes is a reaction when you don't know what something is, what's going on.
Definitely. I think it would have been helpful to kind of get to know them and their diagnoses a little bit more. It would have kind of taken away that, because also you don't want to offend or start talking to them in a way that they're not going to understand without knowing kind of how to approach someone like that. Right. So
I believe in telling people what's going on. If it's a kind of autism that's an internalized experience, formerly Asperger's, that's going to be a personal decision, but it might make life easier for that person to be able to share that they are on the spectrum in that low support needs way, so that others will have compassion and understanding and not be afraid. But again, with the low support needs, that's a personal choice, I would say, right?
Yeah.
But with Abby, you knew the second you walked in this house.
Well, I think that leads into our second question.
Yes, all right, let's get to that. Question number 2 for Casey. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on Casey. Casey came to live with us and with her best friend from college, Mary, who is Abby's now aide helper and helps her with her social media platforms. It's like a big love fest. So they came here with zero understanding of autism. I mean, zero, as Casey has explained.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of, you enter the house and they live with us for 3 months. So I was really nervous to have Mary and Casey move in because of having to manage their experience coming to California with Abby's autism and to live with it, which is a bigger deal because you'll see Abby has all kinds of rituals, behaviors, and things in her home environment.
Yeah.
So when you guys moved in at the very, very beginning, I want to know, what were some of your general impressions of Abby, some of your observations of her differences, and how did you feel about that once you were here in the house with a person with autism?
So I want to back up just one step before that to when we came out for the week.
Oh, that's right.
When we came out,
they did a pre-week to just check out California.
Christine said we should come to LA and make sure we liked it first. And I think it was also like, can I meet you before you come live with me? Because Mary, had never even met her. So, you invited us out. You're like, come on. I think it was like July. You're like, come out, stay with me for a week. And you told us, just so you know, my daughter, Abby, she has autism. So, and you said, she's going to say stuff to you that doesn't make any sense. And when she does, I want you to ask her what she means.
Did I say that?
You did. And I was kind of like, wow, okay. You were like, talk to her like a regular person and just tell her to explain. And I was like, okay, that like, I can do that.
One of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of times people will not treat a person with autism, obvious autism, the same because they don't want to trigger them. They don't want to say the wrong thing. It's completely a positive reaction because nobody wants to be the one to upset someone.
Exactly.
But at the same token, Abby won't grow if people aren't saying, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Because Abby speaks with a lot of memories and old experiences, and it's not necessarily descriptive language. Sometimes it's hard to understand what the reference is.
Yeah. So and that honestly made me feel a lot more comfortable because otherwise I think it would have just been like, she'd be talking about princesses or mermaids or whatever. And I'd be like, okay, cool. Like, that's great, Abby. But instead I felt like I could ask her what she meant. And I actually like kind of got a glimpse into her mind a little bit. Wow. And I think that's a big thing that I've learned from Abby and from you. Like, people with autism, there's a method to the way their brain works.
Yes.
When they're saying things, it seems like it makes no sense and it's off the wall, but there is a reason, and all you have to do is dig a little bit more. And it's amazing like how relatable their thought processes actually are when you take the time to actually try and dive in a little bit and like help them explain what they're thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
So I remember the one thing she kept saying when Mary and I got here. I was, I guess I was 22 and Mary was 23 and Abby had just turned 20. And she was like, how old are you? I'm like, 22. And Mary's like, how old are you? 23. And she was like, we're all in our 20s. Remember, she said that for like, it was
not me. Not me.
It was the first week that she was saying it. And then also when we came back 2 months later and moved in, that was a big thing. She'd come out of her room and be like, girls, we're all in our 20s. And if you hadn't said what you said to me about ask her what she means, I would have never been able to put together like, oh, she's excited that we're all in our 20s because it makes her feel like she's part of the group with us.
Oh, yeah.
And because she's always looked forward to growing up and becoming an adult because she knew that she would be able to have more language. And like, that is something that I would have never gotten to learn or know about her if you hadn't said, like, ask her what she means and tell her to explain.
Yeah. And that's the challenge too, is I think sometimes parents, we have to push them, even though it might be hard for Abby to explain. How else is she going to get there if we don't nudge her into being heard and understood and teach her how to self-advocate or explain? So I'm glad that you mentioned that and glad that worked. Sometimes people think you don't need to disclose your autism to somebody. And I'm like, well, what kind of autism do you have? Because it's pretty obvious when the person is walking around in circles, flapping.
Oh, yeah.
Something is up.
If you hadn't said that, I would have been like, what is wrong with this?
Well, you would have been scared. You would have been how I felt in high school. And we don't want that to happen. We want understanding, compassion. And that being said, even in the high school setting, like if someone's sitting in the back of the room that's shy, shut down and all that, they may be on the spectrum and have what I call different processor, but they're in your class learning just like you are. So have compassion with someone that might have that different processor. Be the difference. Be the one who's kind. Don't just judge because you don't know what's going on. And that person sitting in the back of the classroom could be the next great inventor. And then you're going to wish you married them because they invented some great thing because they're so smart. They have a different processor. So never forget that one.
Very true.
Okay, so that's really good to understand about when you first came in and that helped you feel like you could relate to her.
Totally. And then the other thing was when we were actually finally living here and, you know, in your guys' world, per se, I just remember thinking, what a fun house. Because it's like, Abby's in her room singing, and like Christine's, you know, like doing a million things at once. And
there's always
like,
people over.
There's always people in and out. And like, Abby's just like, you know, this ray of sunshine that we weren't expecting either. You know, you hear someone has autism and you're like, oh, she'll probably kind of keep to herself and not really, we probably won't interact that much. And she's like, good morning. Hi. I'm going to knit some hats and do some stuff. Let's go swimming.
Which is not always as fun as she's making it
Yeah. When you have stuff to do and you live with it your whole life, it has its moments where you're like, Abby, can you go in your room?
You can think about embracing the energy of the autism in your household. It may not be what you ordered. I understand some kids have more, you know, behavior challenges with this yelling and screaming, and we have that too sometimes. But we try to embrace the other part as much as possible.
It was like just
fun,
lots of energy.
Try to remember the fun, even when it
time.
might be difficult, or even when you're late, or even when things don't go. I have to check myself a lot because I'll be overreacting to something, and then I realize I don't have to do that. I don't have to get all wigged out because now we're late for this thing. We'll just have to be late and let it go because it will escalate. Then that's on me, not her.
Yeah.
Okay, coming up, question number 3.